Welcome to my home automation channel. I thought I'm going to just do something different here, mostly because, well, I've seen how other YouTubers do it. Besides making review videos and various projects, they usually show their house. It's just to show what sort of home automation they use. And then, well, that's only one reason why I wanted to do it. The other reason is because most of the time you see me doing projects on like a desk, or I have this special board where I usually mount all my Tuya or the Sonoff devices. But it looks like that I'm doing them for show, for demo, but I don't actually use it in my house. And that's not because I don't believe in them, but well, there is a different reason for that. There's always a different reason. So I wanted to show you my house, and I wanted to explain why I'm not using many of these devices that I usually feature on my channel. And the reason for that is a little bit of history, because when I built my house, then I wasn't too much interested in home automation, but my father-in-law has a business and they do industrial automation. So when we built a house, he said that, if you are going to build your house, I'm just going to look for some of my PLCs that are discontinued from various projects, and we are going to see if we can use it in the house. So this is what happened. So I have a lot of PLCs and industrial controls around my house, like this touch panel. And that's the reason I'm not using this, because, well, pretty much all my automation need was already sort of sorted using off-the-shelf commercial components. And that's what I'm going to be doing a video about today. So for those who are not into this market, PLCs are industrial control computers that are usually used in industrial application. They control, heating, ventilation, and, well, basically any automation task. And what my father-in-law usually focuses on is a lot of utilities. So like water station, sewage treatment plants, water towers, and, just to make sure that they run central heating systems. So the PLCs that I have, and for example, this is one of the main boxes in my house, it's in the garage, is where, some of the magic happens. And if I open this one, you see that actually there is a lot of magic happening here. Let me go a little bit closer. Well, there are many reasons why this is really complicated. What you see here is, you see a PLC here, and they are using PLCs from a Swiss company, which is called the Saya. Let me see if I can zoom on the logo. Yeah, that's them. So this is one of the PLC which is controlling sort of like half of the ground floor and some of the things that are outside, like, for example, sprinklers and that sort of stuff. And the main reasons we have multiple of these, because, well, these were the ones that were lying around from older projects. So that's the brain of the operation, power supply. And you see all these different relays here, because every single light in the house is controlled by the PLC. When I hook up to any of my light switches, they work like a ring switch, or for the doorbell. So you press it once, and then the light comes on. Well, it's quite light at the moment, so you can't see it. And you press it again, and it goes off. And the same with the other light. So I just pressed it, and this big light came on. And when I press it again, it goes off. And maybe you can hear in the background that some relays are kicking in. And I don't know, maybe I can, well, it's too far away, but actually we can see the various relays triggering here. So I think this is one of the relay outputs. So each of my lights is controlled by one of these relays. So everything running 24 volts here. So it's triggering these 24 volt relays, and that switch is the mains output, which is here. And of course, I have loads of various other things here. And the reason you see all these circuit breakers, because I don't know how it works in other European countries, but in Hungary, you usually have two different meters. You have a regular meter and you have off-peak meter. So I think this bank is off-peak and this one is regular, or the other way around. So I switch over to off-peak whenever the off-peak is available. So off-peak comes live at least 8 hours a day, and it's switched on, by the power company. So whenever they think that there is excess power, they turn on the off-peak power. So they remotely, by radio signal, they turn off the relays at the meter. And the idea behind this, because a lot of households, they use electricity to heat domestic hot water. So you usually hook up your domestic hot water to the off-peak, and then you can use cheaper electricity. It's like 30% cheaper than the normal electricity. So you can use that to heat your hot water. But nothing prevents you from using other devices from off-peak electricity when it's available. So I have these relays which basically switch over some of my circuits to off-peak when the off-peak is available. And I do have some other stuff in here. So for example, this big box controls a pump in a well, and actually this is a 3-phase motor controller, which slowly spins up the pump. And because I have 3-phase, I thought we just use this one and some other relays. This is a relay for another pump. And yeah, that's how it looks like. And of course, this PLC has a lot of inputs and outputs. If I remember correctly, these are the various analog inputs mostly for temperature sensors. And these would be, one of them would be inputs from all the different switches, light switches, and the other one would be outputs to, again, switches and some other devices, furnaces. And we do have a few other things which are special, but I don't remember which one of them exactly. I think probably this one is a 0 to 10 volt analog output, which goes to the boiler, and these could be some digital outputs as well. So that's how it looks like. And of course it's, I would say probably it's a fairly neat setup here in this box. And to control all these devices, primarily we have the light switches. So you can see them here. So all of my switches are like that. So I don't have the regular sort of on-off switches. So, I primarily control all my lights from here. The other way to control them is I have 3 of these touch panels around the house. So there is one here, there is one at the garage, and there is one upstairs. And that's where I control most of the functionality. So I can switch on the individual lights from here as well. So for example, if I'm, not this one, sorry, I just have to find the one which is, no. Okay, there could be some bugs in here. But for example, I'm pressing this button and you can see these lights coming on and going off. But honestly, I don't really use that. Well, the only nice feature is that since I have all my lights controlled like this, I have a function here which says turn on all the lights, and downstairs turn off all the lights downstairs, turn all the lights upstairs with a single press of the button. So this one is right next to my front door. And if I just, leave home, then I can just press on this one and all my lights will go off. The other things that I control from the PLCs and from this screen is I can see all the temperatures around the house. So these are the different rooms, and the outside temperature it's pretty warm at the moment. I think this is probably showing a little bit higher. So I can see the temperatures, and the funny thing is these temperatures don't have anything to do with how the temperature is controlled inside the house. So this is more only for information. I have all my domestic hot water heating here, and basically all I can do is I can enable or disable, or I can specify how hot the water I want to be heated up. And I have the entire heating here. And the way the heating works in my house is I have an external temperature sensor, and I have, let me show this one here. I have a set of values which define that for a certain outside temperature, of course this is all Celsius, so 20 Celsius, 10, -2, -20, what is the sort of the water temperature which needs to go into the underfloor heating and the ceiling heating to maintain an even temperature around the house. And this works so well. So this is basically just four values for daytime and 4 values for nighttime. And the heating system is tuned so well in my house that I don't need any external thermostats, and the temperature pretty much remains the same throughout the year and almost in every single room. So maybe the difference, as you can see, well, The difference is going to be more because it's a really sunny day, so some of the south-facing rooms are getting warmer. But even now, you can see the temperatures are sort of like within sort of 1.5 degrees. So that's the whole heating, and I can do some minor adjustments here. Of course, you wouldn't understand Hungarian, but I do have some other sensors. So I measure a lot of temperatures which are coming out of the furnace, going back to the furnace. Is a gas boiler or gas furnace. I also look at some pressure. There are some pressure sensors behind and after the pump, the main circulation pump. And the idea behind that I can have some warnings if, let's say, I can pre-program what the pressure difference should be, and if it's sort of less or more, then I would know that maybe there is a blockage or there is some issue with the pump. But it's been, working fine for the last 5 years. I've never had to touch it, so it is absolutely fine. The other thing I have hooked up is the central alarm, and we managed to do a very simple but very great integration with the alarm, and actually that's quite useful. So the alarm is nothing fancy, it's not connected to the internet. We just have one output, which actually two outputs. So it outputs whether there is an alarm and what's the state of the alarm, whether it's armed or not, and these just come through as digital inputs. So I can see that at the moment there is no alarm and the system is not armed, and basically we just pull relays, and that's how the information comes through. And also I can arm the system from here, and for this one we are again using a relay because that particular alarm supports a key arming. So instead of having a pin code, you can have a key which then turn, and that just sends the signal to the alarm to arm the system or disarm the system, and we are using that. So basically the PLC is pulling a relay, and that's how I can arm it. And the reason I like this one, because as I said, there is a touch screen upstairs, so if I go upstairs I can set the alarm and then the downstairs would be armed. And the various other features here is I can set a vacation when the heating is going to be reduced. I can also monitor here if I have the off-peak power or not. And based on whether I have the off-peak power, I have some appliances that I only start if I have off-peak power. So for example, sprinklers, the valve pump only turn on off-peak, so it doesn't cost as much to basically water the garden. And I have all these settings here for the valve pump. So for example, the big box that you have seen, the three-phase motor converter, that's actually a frequency inverter. So I can specify the pump speed by varying the frequency. So at the moment it's set to 29 Hertz out of 50. And I also have water sensors in the valve and in my tank. So I know how much I need to fill up the tank because my valve fills up my tank, and I use another pump to irrigate the garden from the pump because, from the tank, because the valve doesn't produce enough water to, run the sprinklers. So I have all sorts of stuff here, and then so I can set whether I just want to use it off-peak power, or I can, or if I want to use normal, regular power as well. And yeah, I do have a whole screen for sprinklers. So again, I can set the different zones, how long each zone should run, when the sprinkling should start, and I can start manually and I can start automatically. Yep. I mean, the usual features that you would have from a commercial sprinkler. And I think pretty much it. So some of the other functionalities are redundant. Oh, and I have a separate AC unit. Basically like a separate chiller, and I have that integrated as well to some extent. I haven't finished that integration yet, but because I have the temperature sensors in the room, I can send a signal to the circulation pump whether it needs to circulate the cold water in the ceiling coils in the summer. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But I have to say, I don't use the touch panel very often. So the only feature that I use in the touch panel is if I leave the home, I just turn all the lights off, And then usually in the evenings, I enable the alarm or disable the alarm in the morning. And it just works for me, because otherwise I have all these switches which are always, convenient, and it's much easier to change those, basically operate the lights using the regular switches. And of course I have to say that besides these, I do have a lot of other automation, like for example, I have the staircase here, and if I turn on the lights in the staircase, they would automatically turn off after 15 minutes, or the pantry automatically turns off after 5 minutes, or for example, if I come home and if I disable the alarm, then the PLC would automatically start a circulation pump, so it circulates the hot water around the house, so when you open the tap, you don't have to wait for the hot water to come. So these type of, nothing really complicated. And another thing I want to show, let me just turn on the lights here, is, well, in the garage we had one cabinet, but there is another cabinet here. So this is basically the downstairs cabinet, and it's almost as complicated as the upstairs cabinet. So here we have one PLC. If you happen to know Saya, you know this PCD2 is a very old model. And again, the reason we are using that, because it was easier to build the system distributed that, so we don't have to route all the wires to the garage. So this controls most of the, the downstairs lights. Again, you have all the relays here, and I also have some switches and a lot more circuit breakers here. Again, off-peak, non-off-peak. And we also use this cabinet space to hide some of the heating. Actually, I don't know how you call this in English. These thingies that you can turn in the individual sections on and off. And since I was interested in this whole automation and the PLC business, the one agreement I had with my father-in-law is that he's going to help me design, but then he's going to give me all the software which comes with programming the PLCs, or for example, programming these screens. And I have to do all this on my own. So there is an app where you can design these screens, and you design the various icons. You can design like how these buttons should behave, what should be the icon, what is the icon when the button is pressed, and the different screens and everything. So I've designed all that myself. And of course, the whole PLC also have a web interface. I'm going to show that later. So I can pretty much control everything there. The only caveat is that I had to design that separately, but at least it's custom. It's not like a UI which gets auto-generated, but it's completely custom, so you can do whatever you want. And I just wanted to show the third cabinet, because of course 2 is not enough, so it has to be 3. And this is everything which happens upstairs, and it's run by this very small PCD1 PLC. And again, more circuit breakers here for upstairs. So usually I have a separate circuit breakers for the lamp circuits and the sockets, and probably each, well, I wouldn't say for each room, because I've marked these as the lamps. So this is the 3 lamp circuits. Of course, each of them is connected to different phase. We have some extra stuff here. I have 7 blinds, so the 7 blind controllers are here. Well, actually, these are the relays for the blinds. And I have some additional stuff here, because that's my solar inverter. And some of the DC stuff is here. So AC isolators, and I think these are DC isolators and DC fuses. Maybe you can see it here, but there are an awful lot of thin wires here, because since all my lights are actually switched by the PLC, the signals between the light switches and the PLCs are just 24-volt control signals. So to all my switches, we just run cheap network cable, and we are using the network cable to bring the 24 volts back into the input side of the PLC. And based on the inputs, there are separate 24 volt outputs which are driving these relays, and that's the only place where we are switching mains voltage. Actually, I'll remove this top panel so you can see sort of that's main wires. So that's all mains voltage here, and these are all the network cables which are coming from the various switches. And then if I would remove the switch from the box, then you will see that it's only like standard network cables behind them. So if you do something like this, you can save some money on the wiring, because you can use cheap network cable to run to your switches, and you only have to use the proper cables to your, basically from this box to your lights. Of course, you're spending that money on all the extra gears and the relays and then, you know, whatnot. So again, that's my solar panel. It's a sort of cheapo Chinese converter, but it works great, and it has a great feature because, as you can see, there is a serial plug here which sneaks up there and it goes into a Raspberry Pi. So this was my first Raspberry Pi in the home, and that's running PV output, and it's just uploading all my solar data to pvoutput.org. And I said I'm going to show the web interface, and I almost forgot about that, and I realized that in editing that I don't have the footage. So I'm using my crusty old iPad 2 to access this website. And again, this whole thing comes back from the fact that these industrial systems started developing like probably 20 years ago, and they don't really keep up to date with the newest technology, because the thing which is running this web interface is actually a big Java applet, which is almost impossible to get running in any of the nowadays current browsers, because they just don't support Java anymore. And so there is a small app which is basically just a micro browser which is running this. You still provide a URL and it just loads the Java applet and runs the application. But in the other hand, it is a nice responsive app, and I could design it in whatever way I want it. So this is, for example, my overview screen. So I have the layout of the ground floors and upstairs, and I just put some text boxes here which shows me the different temperatures, and as you can see, some other things here. And then I have these status lights, and let's say, for example, this is supposed to give me the domestic hot water. So I have a few things. So I have some buttons so I can control the whatever temperature the hot water I want that to be, and I also have these switches so I can just enable basically hot water or disable it. And everything you see is, for example, these buttons, they are just actual images, and I designed the on image and the off image. And in this editor program that I use to design this whole web interface, you can just specify that, okay, you have an image here, like a button here that you can press, and then based on what value that flag is, you either show this image or you show the other image. So I've designed all this in CorelDRAW, so they look like actual buttons, and they look like 3D. And of course, these buttons also illuminate. So for example, in the main page, you can see that that's the circulation pump, so it's on, so it's like green background, and then whenever it's off, it's like a gray background. So I actually spend a lot of time to make sure that it looks nice. Also, going back a little bit to the technology, nowadays it's a little bit hard to access because it doesn't support any HTTPS as far as I know. So everyone told me not to open my PLC open to the internet. So if I want to access this from the outside, I usually have to VPN into my home network, and then I can access it locally. And this is one of the reasons why I started the Northern integration, because one of the things that I use the most, I wouldn't even use this interface. I just use Telegram, or I use the Home app, the Google Home app, and I use the Google Home integration. But so that's sort of like the main screen. You can see temperatures, and then that was the domestic hot water. So I even have a graph. I think I can zoom out. Not that it's going to be awfully complicated too. I mean, domestic hot water is just like goes up and down. And what else? Okay, that's downstairs. I can control the lights here. So we are here. I can turn on the lights. Hopefully you can see. Oh yeah, you can see the reflection of the lights. I mean, basically all the lights, and then all the outputs that I control from regular light switches I put here as well. And on upstairs, one of the recent additions I made is I have all the blind controllers, which takes up an awful lot of space. I think I can do it a little bit smarter as well. I just use 4 different buttons and to go to separate preset levels, like fully open, fully closed, and then sort of like 2 other states in between. Oh, I have one light on upstairs running, So yeah, that's pretty much it. I also have a lot of stuff here where I can look at various charts, and I really have to look into this, but it stopped working at some point. But as you see, you build all this functionality and then you don't use it, most of the stuff. So I mean, I don't really have to know how the temperature trends in my home. Everything is working fine. To be honest, I never look at the statistics. Probably the only other thing I do here is the water and then sprinklers, irrigation, and the well pump. And it's funny because if you see one of the screens, for example this one, it's how I control my well pump. And the reason you see so many things here, because originally there wasn't like a three-phase motor, so I have one set of controls where I was just controlling how long. It's like an on-off cycle, so this is what I've done here. And then I have the frequency one, so that's like the middle one, that's what I'm using at the moment. And I think this is also some feature that I used in the past when I had some issues with the frequency inverter, and then it was, I think it was just an on-off state or something like that. So as you can see, it constantly evolves, and then in some cases I don't leave some of the, or don't remove some of the old functionality. So that's like water, and I also have the different zones and how long each zone should run. And it's still a lot of custom stuff. And funny thing is, I still haven't integrated the like the weather reporting in the irrigation. So I just have this kind of setup. So I would say that I want the irrigation to run on, well, in this particular setup, only on Thursday and Sunday. And I just usually come here and fine tune it based on what the weather is like. So if it's like a really hot summer day, then I would have irrigation running every second day. And if it's, you know, less sunny or less warm, then, you know, only 2 times a week. And I could have done it with, you know, with all the node integration and looking at Weather Underground or some of the other services and look at what the rain prediction is for the next day, but it just works for me just fine. And to be honest, that's pretty much it. I think it's, I do have some other stuff, some settings, but yeah, the main thing is looking at the temperature, of course remotely controlling the heating, but yeah, I've also learned that because the heating has so much buffer in this house, even if you leave for a week, there is no point turning the heating off because the amount of gas that I'm going to be saving is really, really small. And if I let the house cool down a lot, then it takes a lot of time to heat it up again. So I just usually leave it on all the time. And I usually, you know, come to heating about twice a year when I need to completely turn off the heating in sort of like before summer, and also in the beginning of autumn when sort of I start up all the system, and that's pretty much it. Works fine for me. And finally, we are back in my study. I think you might have seen some of the parts of this room in my other videos. And in here behind these plants, you see my main Raspberry Pi. So that's my Raspberry Pi, which is running Node-RED. And I have some of the Modbus devices that I have connected. Usually this is what I made videos on. And that's the RF link. But that's the only setup that I have. But as you can see, since I have done the most, you know, general home automation, you know, controlling lights, blinds, garage doors, sprinklers, those are all handled by the PLC. I'm using the Raspberry Pi and the Node-RED to more sophisticated and internet-based functions. So I don't have too many physical controls here. This is more like, you know, software logic and then, you know, screen stuff and UI. But there is actually a connection between this Raspberry Pi and the PLC, because the PLCs, well, the main PLC in the garage is on the Ethernet and also the touch screen. So this is how they communicate. And then the other 2 PLCs are connected in an internal bus between the main one in the garage. And the main one in the garage has opens up its ports and flags on Modbus that I can access from Modbus. So this is how I built most of my integration, like my Google Home stuff. It talks to my Node-RED, and from the Node-RED I send the corresponding Modbus messages, which then turn on my lights. And this is how I can also get some information, so I can see the temperatures, the state of my lights, and basically all the data that I have available on the PLCs, I can get in Node-RED as well using Modbus over TCP. And I think that's pretty much it. Well, maybe it's not going to be very useful for you, but at least you have seen how a home automation done when it's not, well, I wouldn't say professional, but when it's not completely DIY, but it's more made from more industrial equipment. Of course, it's not the same quality, definitely not the same price, even though these are really old models, but I'm pretty sure that some of these PLCs would cost quite a lot, not to mention all the relays, the extra, wirings and everything. And of course, it has to be thought through from the beginning, because these units don't use Zigbee, they don't use Wi-Fi, so everything is wired. But on the same thing, it just doesn't go wrong. I don't have to touch it. If my internet goes down, even if my router is gone, the only thing I lose the touch panels, but my switches still work, and most of the built-in automation still works. So, and actually I'm quite happy with it. It's a good mix of these different two words, and I still have access to both of them. I can make changes wherever I want, but I guess that's just my special situation that I have with my father-in-law. But I think that will be all. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.